Well, it was the spring of 1965. I just finished out my freshman year at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, and was probably the last freshman on campus. I was living in a pretty much empty dormitory with seniors around here and there waiting to graduate. My excuse for being there was an assistant to the sound person for the senior play. She was, of course, my girlfriend. It wasn't a terrific relationship. We'd both been recently dumped. I by my high school girlfriend, who had not quite graduated from, he was a year younger than I, engineered by her parents over some disagreement about politics, Vietnam War. It was, I was eating within 3 days and recovered embarrassingly quickly. But it wasn't the same for Nancy, who was just waiting to graduate from Bates. She'd been dumped by a West Point cadet who had been convinced by his buddies that she was not pretty enough. And given the code under which this young man had lived for a year or three, he stood right in front of her, looked her straight in the eye, and told her in no uncertain terms, thus destroying the pleasure of her youth. Our relationship was doomed from the beginning, but that's not the story. Although I will say, please, young men, do not comment to your buddies about the beauty of their girlfriends. It can be more destructive than you can possibly imagine. The talk in those days before graduation was about the bout down in the center of Lewiston at what we called the hockey rink. And the game was going to be getting in for free. I remember my first awareness that this was coming, receiving a lecture from a senior who had nothing better to do than talk to me, who said, Cassius Clay has to win because he represents the new American black man, whereas Sonny Liston represents the old. And I remember this fellow's exact words because they shocked me a bit. Swearing, womanizing, whiskey drinking, and he used the N-word, but of course that was all right because he was a professional sociologist. Anyhow, we all walked down to the arena, and one of these seniors, had dressed himself up, I'm not making this up, as a peanut salesman. And he had a open cardboard box around his neck on a strap. I don't know where he got the peanuts, and a card in his hat with a price on it. I don't remember the price, and he walked right in. Another one of us, I think I remember his name, but I'm not sure enough to say it, carried a typewriter and wore a pork pie hat, I'm not making this up, with a card in it on which he had carefully printed press. And I was close enough to the door to hear what he said, which was, "I have 17 college newspapers waiting for my report." And he walked right through. And I kind of stood there. Wasn't much else to do. And things quieted down when all of a sudden this sound came out of the building. And I guess I could describe it as a roar, but that would be inaccurate because it was more like 2,000 or 3,000 people had all been punched in the belly at the same time. And it came out of the doors of that arena with some force. My guess is the doors and the front doors, in front of which I stood, facing off with the guards, was the only hole in that entire chamber, and the sound came out of it like a cello. And everybody at the door, all those official guys and the ticket takers and all those people, turned and focused themselves inside and started moving inside, and I just ran straight in. I didn't have any thought, but I made one quick rule for myself. I couldn't fly. There was space overhead, of course, and the next best space was down below between the legs. And so I decided I would begin shooting through legs, and I would always choose 2 legs that were dissimilar, because it seemed to me not a good idea to squirt myself between somebody's legs, because they might squeeze them together and catch me. So I started in. I'd been on the track team, high school anyway, and was a pretty good athlete at the time. I was 6 feet tall and weighed 130 pounds. And I got down into starting position and shot myself between the first 2 dissimilar legs. And as soon as I hit a space, I'd go back down into starting position and shoot between the next 2. And I don't think it took me more than a minute to get to ringside. I was not winded, so it couldn't have been a whole lot longer. And there, standing alone, was Cassius Clay, standing straight, probably 6 feet from the ring, standing on the floor, upright, arms at his side. And I reached out my right hand and took his right hand in mine in a standard congratulatory handshake. And I lifted that heavy hand, and it was the biggest hand I'd ever held, and thick, exceedingly thick, and evenly calloused. And I got the best handshake type grip on it I could possibly get, and I proceeded to make congratulatory movements. Was about to raise my head to say something in the same vein when the thumb of that hand pulled back, evenly and slowly, pressed its tip against the web of my hand between thumb and forefinger, and pressed it straight down and straight out of itself. And I looked up at his face, expecting to see a look of anger or disgust or something, and I saw nothing. He didn't even know I was there. His eyes were focused, if at all, straight across the top of the crowd, unmoving. My conclusion was that he was in shock. And that's really where my recollection ends. I don't remember backing away. I'm sure I did. He was a dangerous man. And I don't remember walking home, walking back to campus. I don't remember how I got out of the building, whether I walked through the crowd or hung around. I remember hearing. I remember what I heard. And I remember what I concluded. I heard what happened. Over and over and over again, I heard people saying, what happened? Strange people to me, dressed to the nines, women, well, if you know the boxing crowd, you know the boxing crowd. I certainly didn't. What happened? Over and over again, and did he throw the fight? Did he throw the fight? Over and over again. My conclusion is that the fight ended before the crowd really got around to watching it. It was a big surprise to everybody because they weren't ready for anything to happen yet.